Information online about gout can be particularly confusing, and that's because we don't understand all the mechanisms behind what causes it, but there are a lot of big clues. A gout attack is not pleasant. It often leaves people hospitalised for days, if not weeks, because of the pain. I think more importantly, gout is kind of like a clue into more serious health problems going on behind the scenes, kind of like a window into the state of someone's metabolic health. So this video looks at the top 6 foods you should avoid with gout, and based on what we know and how it applies to you. So just to quickly recap, what is gout? Gout is a form of joint inflammation caused by excessive uric acid in the blood. So when the body's natural uric acid threshold is exceeded, painful crystals form in and around the joints. You can see in the diagram that's illustrated. So the excessive uric acid is typically driven by 2 factors: your family history, which you obviously can't do anything about, and high purine foods. So the uric acid is formed when the purines we eat are metabolized, so they're like a byproduct of that metabolism. Now, it's normal to have uric acid in your blood, but not in high amounts. That's when we get problems. Therefore, consuming less purine-rich foods should lower your uric acid levels in your blood and lower your gout risk. At least that's in theory. It turns out there's other nutrients that also contribute to gout, which we're going to discuss. Okay, the number 1 food to avoid is alcohol, particularly beer, but all types of alcohol seem to have an effect. Now this has been well studied and well proven that an increased alcohol intake can trigger a flare-up or increase your risk of an initial flare-up of gout. So the Framingham Heart Study, which included over 4,500 participants, provides us some good insight. So researchers found that for women, regular alcohol use was linked with a 3 times greater risk of gout compared to those who have 2 drinks or less per week. For men, regular drinkers have double the risk of non-drinkers of having gout. Interestingly, beer was found to be the worst, followed by hard spirits like whiskey and bourbon. So why alcohol increases uric acid levels is still not well understood, because although beer is high in purines, it's not the richest source of purines in the diet. And remember that the theory is that purines increase uric acid, which increases your chance of gout. Now, many researchers propose that too much alcohol might reduce the body's ability to get rid of uric acid, so that's how it builds up. Others say it increases the chemical breakdown of what's called ATP nucleotides, which contain purine, and they're required for uric acid production, so they're kind of like a step in the production process. So the next foods to look out for are meat, like chicken and beef and pork and lamb. There's a lot of data to back this up, but every additional serving of meat increases your gout risk by 21%, and additional servings of seafood increase by 7%. So it does seem that meat increases your risk of gout 3 times more than seafood. So the impact of meat intake and maybe seafood on gout symptoms is even worse for those who already have gout. Therefore, if you have a history of it, it's best to really cut down on your meat intake and seafood as well to a lesser extent. Now, in saying that, I do believe that omega-3 supplements, like fish oil supplementation, a high quality one, which will be very low or purine free, can help with gout symptoms because they have very powerful anti-inflammatory properties, which is shown to help. Number 3 food to avoid, which I've separated from regular meat, is organ meats, so otherwise known as offal. Now, they are by far the richest source of purines in our diet if you eat them. They're not that common in the Western diet. The most common is probably liver or a mixture called pate, which is more like a spread. So I guess the problem with the research for organ meats is that they're not separated from regular meat when studies have been conducted, so we don't actually have hard data on offal versus normal meat. But if we're going to say that normal meat is high in purines and causes gout, then organ meats definitely do, because they're much more rich in purines. Now, somewhat contradictory to the purine gout theory, consumption of purine-rich vegetables is not linked with an increased risk of gout. So this could be due to a lower bioavailability of the purines in vegetables, which is how accessible they are by the body. So the body doesn't actually get exposed to them as much as in meat. It can also be due to the presence of other nutrients, which may offset the negative impact of their purines. So this is why I'm not so sure the purine gout theory tells the whole story. I think there's other nutrients involved that trigger gout, and that's what we're going to take a look at now. So food number 4 is added sugar, specifically fruit juices and soft drinks or sodas. Now, this is not advice that's normally given in conventional gout treatment, and I'm not sure why, because there's a lot of data to back it up. So the added sugar we typically eat is 50% glucose and 50% fructose molecules, which are metabolized quite differently. Now, soft drinks and fruit juices tend to have the greatest amount of added sugar, and therefore they're often the greatest amount of added fructose in our diet. Nothing compared to fruits, which have very minimal fructose. Now, gout occurrence in the US has risen in line with an increase in fructose. So in this graph it's listed as high fructose corn syrup, and it looks at the intake of high fructose corn syrup since 1970 and the occurrence of gout. So it doesn't prove anything, but is a very interesting association. Now, in a large study of over 46,000 men, researchers found that 2 or more sugar-sweetened soft drinks a day was linked with an 85% increased risk of gout, so that's almost double. Now, the largest drinkers of soft drinks and consumers of sweet foods actually had a risk of gout comparable to the risk seen with 3 to 5 servings of alcohol. So pretty extreme. Now, the strange thing out of all this, though, is that soft drinks and foods with added sugar don't typically contain purines. So you can either say that there is no direct link between added sugar and gout, because the studies that we have had are only associations, they don't prove cause and effect. Or you could say that we are missing a piece of the puzzle, and it's not only purines that cause gout. Now, researchers that believe added sugar does have a role to play think that fructose is the culprit linking added sugar with gout, so not glucose. Now, fructose appears to share the same mechanism as alcohol. It may accelerate the breakdown of purine-containing nucleotides like ATP. So while it doesn't contain purine itself, it makes purine in the body. So this is what would drive up uric acid levels and cause gout. Now, glucose and other simple sugars, on the other hand, have no effect on uric acid at all. And this comes down to the way that fructose is metabolized in the liver, whereas glucose is metabolized in the cells. Frequent consumption of certain fruits may also trigger gout. Now, I know I said that fruit is very low in fructose compared to soft drinks and sugar sweetened foods, which is true, except for a few particular fruits that we need to look out for. Now, fruits are good for you. We should be eating fruits, really. They're high in fiber and a lot of other nutrients, so I don't want to say don't eat fruit, but this is kind of like a plan D. If you've been limiting everything else but you still get gout attacks, or you're very worried about gout, there's just a couple of fruits that you should really limit or avoid. So the link comes back to fructose once more. So fructose is naturally found in fruit and honey. Now, whilst most fruits are really low in fructose and not a worry, there's just a few fruits that are extremely high. Frequent consumption of these could theoretically cause problems for gout sufferers, especially if you already have a lot of flare-ups. So just to compare the foods and give you some perspective, this looks at the fructose content in foods per 200 calories. So you got regular soft drink is the highest, and then you can see as follows: you got honey, and you got apple juice, and then you have raw apples, watermelon, and medjool dates, which are also quite high. Now, 200 calories of a regular soft drink is a can of soft drink. 200 calories of apple is three whole medium apples. For watermelon, it's 2.5 wedges of watermelon, and 200 calories of dates is only 3 dates. So you can see that if soft drink or apple juice, for example, is causing you problems, then it's very easy to consume too much fructose from those fruits as well. I often eat more than 3 medjool dates in one sitting, and I could definitely eat 2.5 wedges of watermelon. So number 6 is aspirin and diuretic medications. They're not exactly foods, but ingestion of these is shown to sharply raise your risk of gout attack. So with aspirin, it's specifically low doses of aspirin. High doses of aspirin, above 3,000 milligrams, are actually shown to excrete uric acid. The problem with low doses, so say what you would take for your headache or for heart medication, actually prevents the excretion of uric acid. So that's how it can trigger gout. In a study of 49 elderly patients, 75 milligrams of aspirin per day increased blood uric acid levels by 6% within 1 week. A daily dose of 150 milligrams kept levels high during the second week, before coming down with 300 milligram doses in the third week. So as the dose increases, the uric acid level decreases. Now, when you consider the typical dose for heart disease prevention is 81 to 300 milligrams per day of aspirin, it's no surprise that this dose is associated with a doubling in gout risk. In fact, even the use of low-dose aspirin for 2 consecutive days as a painkiller, for example, increases your risk of a recurrent gout attack if you've already had one. So I'm not recommending you cease your medications if you have gout, but it's important just to understand that there is pharmaceutical triggers as well. So if you have been doing all the right things dietary-wise and you still take a regular aspirin for heart medication or as a painkiller, then it could all be for waste. So before you make any changes, though, you definitely got to speak with your doctor and closely monitor your uric acid levels, and then you can make a decision from there. So just to recap, the top 6 foods to avoid with gout are alcohol, beef, chicken and other meats, offal, soft drinks or fruit juice, certain fruits, particularly dates, watermelon, if you eat a lot of them, and low-dose aspirin and diuretics. While diet is crucial, make sure you're not overlooking other important factors for gout risk. Those include sleep apnea, which affects your sleep quality, and the level of physical activity that you do. Now, if you want additional information and the full list of scientific references I used in this video, you can see the original article by clicking this link.